If you apply at least one of these rules to your comic creation process, then I guarantee that you'll create it faster and have more fun while doing so. No more stalling and no more feeling that you can't complete your comic because you're not good enough. If you're new, I'm John and I help comic creators complete their comics without burning out. Now let's get to that first rule. Rule number 1, iterate and move on. So I did this page of thumbnails for my comic Flowers and Shadows, and when I was finished, I didn't feel great about it. This usually happens when I'm feeling unhappy about the pacing or the panel shapes or the general composition. Or maybe it was because I was feeling tired. So I slept on it and recreated it the following day and did this. For my tastes, I think this page is much better in pretty much every conceivable way. But is it perfect? No. Could it be better? Almost certainly. Do I want to redraw it again and again until I eventually conclude that I should start the whole thing over because there are too many mistakes and I suck and I want to set everything on fire? Sure. But I'm not allowed to because of this rule. If I'm going to redraw the thumbnails of a page, I'm only allowed to do it once. Because you're always going to feel like you could do a better job than you did, and there's probably some truth to that. But it's better to solidify your ideas without overthinking it too much and then moving on to the next page. Otherwise, you'll be stuck on the same page and you'll never complete your comic. Rule number 2, you must understand your thumbnails. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. The thumbnails are the most important part of drawing your comic. So many people rush through them so they can get to the pencils, inks and colors faster, but if you do that, you're setting yourself up to fail. If you spend more time on your thumbnails to the point where you know exactly what your comic is going to look like in terms of the pacing, composition, even the acting of your characters, then you'll rarely ever need to redraw your pencils or inks. In fact, if you combine rules number 1 and 2, then you'll never have to redraw a page ever. Which not only means that you'll complete your comic faster, but you'll be in a constant state of forward momentum, and that is unbelievably powerful. Rule number 3, there's always tomorrow. This rule is in place to stop me and you from being too hard on ourselves and catastrophizing our situation. I'm sure you've intended to work on your comic, but for one reason or another, you haven't been able to do it. Or you expected to complete a page, but you only got a couple of panels done. In the past, this would send my anxiety through the roof, and I wouldn't really be able to think about anything other than getting the thing that I wanted done. Not only is that an incredibly unhealthy way to live, but it's also self-defeating. If you're in a state of anxiety over drawing your comic, then you're going to be nervous while you're doing it, which means that you'll slow down, second guess every decision you make, and your drawings will end up stiff and lifeless, which means you're going to want to redraw them more. And the cycle continues and you don't ever end up finishing your comic. If I haven't been able to do what I set out to do for any reason, then I'll just repeat to myself, there's always tomorrow. It's a magical phrase that stops me going down that path of overanalyzing and worrying, and it works really well for me, so give it a try. Life gets in the way, stuff happens. Sometimes we overestimate how much energy we're going to have after we get home from work, or after we spend all day cleaning up after the kids, or spending all day in school. And it's okay if you're not able to get everything done that you said you would get done on an arbitrary day. There are plenty of days left for you to work on your comic, and there's always tomorrow. Rule number 4, take the time to plan. I am not very good at planning. At least, I wasn't very good at planning. I was very much I'll figure it out as I go kind of person. And that's mostly because I was impatient. I wanted to get to the drawing part as quickly as possible, and so I would do the bare minimum of prep work before starting my comic. And this almost always ends up the same way. You'll get to a point in your comic where you have to stop and backtrack because you didn't figure out the floor plan for the building that your scene takes place in. And you've realized that your character has come through a door that is impossible based on the layout that you've already established. And so you either have to redraw the last 10 pages or hope that nobody notices. Or maybe you've forgotten halfway through that your characters had their ear pierced and a tattoo on their left shoulder, but now you're drawing the tattoo on the right shoulder and the ear piercing has changed from an earring to a loop. And it's because you didn't give yourself clear character references so that you can remain consistent throughout. They're quite specific examples, aren't they? Well, that's because I've done exactly those things and more, and it slows you down and causes nothing but frustration. And it wasn't until I started planning seriously that I noticed I wasn't having nearly as many of these issues anymore. And I also noticed that it was impacting the speed with which I was creating, because I wasn't having to double back on myself. Comics are hard enough even when you have everything in place, so if you can do yourself a favor, then do it. And one of the biggest favors you can do for yourself is invest a little bit more time in the planning phase. I know it's boring and not as fun as drawing the awesome scenes that you've conjured up, but it's worth it. Your future self will thank you. Now, this could be anything, but some examples could be figuring out the floor plans of your environments, or creating enough character references to serve you throughout the comic, or even creating 3D models of your environments. I actually have a free 10-day email course that covers planning as well as all the other elements that make up making comics, from thumbnails right through to marketing. The link is in the description. It's absolutely free, and I'll email you every day for 10 days with a new lesson. Rule number 5, you are what matters. It's weird that we all seem to forget this one, but we do, myself included. You are the most important asset in your comic creating life. The comic simply doesn't exist without you, so why do we jeopardize it by not taking proper care of ourselves? I'm not going to cover all ground by saying that you need to take care of your sleep and your diet and your exercise, because if you've been watching my videos, then you already know that. And we all kind of know it intuitively anyway. So instead, I'm going to offer some things that I always do whenever I sit down to make my comic, which allows me to keep going even if I don't always 100% feel like it. First, I fill up my water bottle and I make sure that I drink it after I've completed every single panel. If you're dehydrated even a little bit, then it impacts your cognitive function, so it's kind of important. And when you're in the zone, it can be very easy to neglect simple things like hydration. Next, I'll stand up and stretch every 25 minutes or so. I often use the Pomodoro timer in my comic creation studio planner to help me track the time. And this stops me from getting aches and pains, and it keeps the blood flowing so that I can remain loose while I'm drawing, which is particularly useful for making beautiful lines. This is how I make lines. I'm an artist. And finally, if I'm drawing badly, then I'll just do something else for a while. This could be anything, but if you want to remain productive and feel like you're still working on your comic, then just work on a different area of your comic. For example, if I'm having a really bad drawing day and this page is just destroying me, then I'll put that page to one side and I'll thumbnail the next page. And if my confidence is a little low, then I'll do a sketch of a character that I know I'm good at drawing. Not only does that help give me a little confidence boost, but you can add it to your character references, or you could use it in future marketing material. So nothing's wasted. And even if that's all I do for that day, at least I've contributed something to the comic. In the past, whenever I had bad drawing days where just my hand and my eyes were not cooperating, I would try and just force my way through it and just force myself to draw. And all that did was make me really frustrated and angry, and the drawings almost never ever came out right. We're all going to have bad drawing days, and it often comes at random and for no discernible reason whatsoever. And if you can't get over that slump for whatever reason, then refer back to rule number 3. There's always tomorrow. Now, these rules are in place to keep myself in check. If you nodded along while I was talking about them, then some of them may really help you too. Or maybe you already do them. I know we don't like to follow rules because it feels like they're stifling our creativity or spontaneity, but these are about keeping you in one piece so that you can do what you do best, which is tell your stories through your comics. And you should watch this video next to see which things you should consider stopping in 2025 in order to make your comics better.